Let us start with the Q&A for tonight. Okay, during Vipassana meditation, we always be mindful of what's happening inside us, mind and body. But when we are not meditating, we are also trying to be mindful, but we get a lot of irritation and suffering watching the body and mind as we watch and wait. Should we be watching only external? A bit confused sometimes. Now, while we are meditating, of course, what do you say that we pay attention, be aware, and we learn to accept to what is going on clearly or prominently in our objects, like for example, the rising, falling, or the in-breath, out-breath, or the sensations, or the pain that's going on. We learn to observe them as clear as possible, and we learn to keep on continuously observe them so that we can able to understand and able to gain the mindfulness, concentration, wisdom to be a bit more better, stronger. As we keep on doing it, the mind becomes clearer, sharper, and more penetrative. Now, while we are going through all this meditation, of course, we go through all the irritation and difficulty and tension and pressure and so on. Then we go through all this suffering. And while we go through all this suffering, please make sure that you don't start to do your karuna there, May I be free from all this suffering. Wrong. That is for karuna only. When you are going through all the suffering and so on, all the difficulty while you are in Vipassana, you got to watch them, see them as they really are. You got to see them, their strength, it becomes stronger and so on. It become very powerful, it become very unbearable, very irritating, very suffering inside there. So when you go through all those things, then that is how we do Vipassana. But translating back to the everyday life, sometimes for us there may be a hiccup or some difficulty of putting the whole practice in the everyday life. Now in the everyday life, of course, we are not expecting you to do like what we are doing in the retreat center. But in the retreat time, we are constantly and as much as possible, we try to be alert and mindful and present. Yes, that's what we are supposed to do. But in the everyday life, especially for like lay people, you have a lot of things to do. And a lot of times you are not mindful. But supposing that there are certain times that we are mindful and we make an effort to be mindful, make an effort to come back to the present, come back to the center, come back to here and now. And while we are here and now, the manifestation of this suffering part of it also becomes quite strong. And when it becomes quite strong, you also need to learn to accept them as they are. Now, a lot of times when we note this pain or when we have attention on this pain, the back of the mind, we tend to try to push it away. We try to reject it. We try to reject it, and then, of course, when we try to reject it, that means there's a certain degree of aversion or dislike at the back of the mind, which we are not mindful of. So we kind of like get engrossed and get engaged into the irritation, into the pain, into whatsoever that is bothering. Then when we look into that thing, our mind becomes unsettled. So what should we do then? Again, the same principle apply. The same principle apply like what we do in the retreat is that when you come into the everyday life, on all this suffering and all this sickness and all the illnesses and all the pain and aches and whatnot now, Sometimes when we cross 50, that's all our sufferings like coming in, one after another. as if like we are just rolling on with all this one. Now I'm seeing it already. But Malaya slowly come. Sometimes I told the devotees while their lunchtime, I told them, "Hey, I'm getting old already, you know." With incredulous look, they look at me. Huh? You are old? That's where when we get this one, all your sight, eyes, you cannot see. Your ears also start problem. Your cholesterol start go high. Your BP start go high. What not? What else is there starts coming in? When in the 20s and 30s, well, we never heard of all this. I mean, we heard of all these things, but it's still not affecting you. It's just like last time when I'm in the 30s, when I give the Dhamma talk, yeah, we all got suffering through. But kaki tebo, we don't feel the suffering yet. I mean, in the sense of sickness and so on. But nowadays, different story. The suffering has more deeper experience. But anyway, that is whole thing, you see. When we come to the everyday life, we translate from what we do from our vipassana meditation. We translate into everyday. We learn to accept this pain, and we learn also to take this pain as not my pain, in that sense. This is just the nature of the body and mind. The body, the pain is inevitable. As we roll in the years, it's inevitable. We got to learn to accept them as they are. Although we try to slow them down, or we try to reduce the illness and so on, but that's what we all can do. They delay it in that sense. But other than that, the mind itself, we got to learn to accept them as they are. We got to learn to and take it that this is not my pain. Although we are still taking medication, supplements, and so on, that is perfectly all right. But in the back of mind is just the process of the body, the aging of the body. So here we are, when we able to have that state of mind, then when it comes to your suffering and all that thing, yes, the body still suffer, doesn't mean that there's no suffering, but the mind is free from that suffering, free from that anger, or free from that hatred, free from that dislike. And then at least for that period of time, the mind is more settled. The mind much more settled, although here and there'll be sickness in the body. The Buddha used to put a simile of the two arrows. One arrow will struck the body, and the other arrow struck the mind. If you're not mindful, if you're mindful, if you're alert, if you're contemplative, in that sense, then there's one arrow will struck the body, but there's no arrow will struck the mind, will strike on the mind. So this is how we learn to accept a change of the mind states. And this changing of the mind states, it's a lot to do with our mental development over the years. It sounds easy, really it sounds easy, just do this and do that, but our attitude, our mental attitude over the years that we build up over time is so hardened, then by the time that we're reaching all this aging and sickness, and here we are, we're going to change our mental attitude, sometimes that will be a bit too late. We might want to change a little bit, but after that it goes back to its old attitude. Then after that we suffer, we get angry, we get annoyed, we get all kinds of mental disorder or sickness and so on. So hopefully we cultivate the mind as much as possible. When the irritation and difficulty comes into our life, we learn to accept them as they are. We learn to take it as, the suffering in the body, we take them as they are. We learn to take them as not I, and then the mind settle. When the mind settled, the mind is more open. When the mind open, we at least we have a clearer mind how to treat the body this way or that way. This is something on the first this one.